CSS container queries are finally here, and that means our responsive layouts and responsive components are about to get a whole lot easier to write. We've been building responsive layouts with media queries for about the past decade now, but they've had some serious drawbacks. And to make up for that, we've had to use complex CSS or janky client-side JavaScript. Well, those days are gone. Now we can make components that perfectly lay out within whatever container we give them with some very simple CSS. So I'm going to show you all about that and how that's done. And I'm going to give you my methodology for how to separate the work when it comes to doing responsive layout versus styling in a way where you don't lose your mind. Let's get right into it. All right, so here is the demo application that we're going to be working with. It's a bunch of movie posters laid out when it comes to a desktop in this 2-column arrangement. Now, all of these cards, these movie cards, are the same, and they lay themselves out differently depending on the form factor that they're given. When they're given a narrow format, like this sidebar over here, they lay themselves out vertically to better use that space. And then when they have some space, as they are in this content section over here, they lay themselves out horizontally in a 2-column layout. So the column 1 is the poster, and then column 2 is this info section. So as we make this smaller, you can see that there is a breakpoint around 900 pixels where you go from a 2-column layout to a 1-column layout. But we still have some space, so we're laying our cards out horizontally. But then as that space gets smaller, we jump to a 1-column layout. So we have 2 separate breakpoints here. We have one for the layout and then another for the cards. So a fairly complex layout, but you'll see, having used these container queries, that this is actually just super, super simple to accomplish. Okay, so let's go over into our VS Code and create our vanilla version of this. We're going to use CSS just out of the box. We're not going to use any libraries or anything like that. We're just going to use React and very basic CSS so you can see exactly how this works. All right, so let's go over here to our VS Code, and I'll use yarn create v to create a vanilla test application using the React template. And I'll go in there, install it, and then run it. Now I'm going to keep both of these applications running simultaneously so we can kind of migrate this one into our new application. In fact, I'll give this one a title that says that it's the old application. All right, there we go. So old application. All right, so let's go clean up our application and get rid of all that kind of boilerplate stuff. All I really need is the CSS. So let's get rid of everything else. And then over in the CSS, I'm just going to take this index down to just say I want Arial as the font. And for app CSS, we'll just get rid of all of it. Okay, cool. So now we have a nice basic starting point. So how is this page laid out? Well, the first thing that we have is we have this page div. That's the green bounded area here. And that's actually centered using a margin auto left and right. And then it's given a max width. That's why it's not going out to the full extent of the page. So as we make this smaller, we can see that it just ends up being the whole frame after a little while, but it does a nice job of centering itself. So let's go and make that one first. So we'll go back over here. So we'll add a class onto this and call it page. And then over in our app CSS, we'll define that. We'll say that as a max width of 1,000 pixels. And then we get a margin of auto. So also give ourselves a border and then a min height so that we can always see it. All right, so now a good start. So the way that I do responsive is I work in zones. I try to get the layout working first, and then I worry about the content and the styling. I'm just trying to get the boxes to move around right. And so in this case, we have a box within this green box. And then this golden box, this layout box, can then either have as its layout internally either a grid with 2 columns like we have here, or no layout at all, which just means that the contents will stack on top of one another down when you go to the smaller size. So let me show you that. So let me show you that in a little bit more detail. So here we have two sections. We've got the main section over here, and then we've got the article or sidebar section. I'm using main and article because I'm actually going to use those as the semantic tags. And currently, this golden section, the layout section, is saying I want a 2-column layout where this main takes up, I think, 2/3 and the article takes up 1/3. And then when we have a breakpoint at around 900 pixels, then we just take off the grid and that gives us this cascading layout. So let's go and build this. So the first thing I need to do is create that layout div. And let's go make the CSS for that. So we'll give that goldenrod. All right, so now we've got our layout within that. And now inside of that, we want to nest our main and our article. All right, so now those are laying out as divs, and we can show that using CSS. All right, so we've got a good div layout going on here. But what we want is we want the 2-column layout that we have here when we're over about, say, 900 pixels. So how do we do that? Well, we have the layout container here. And what we want to do is we want to change its layout so that it goes to a grid layout with 2 columns when it hits that breakpoint. So we need to figure out how to get the width of the container here, which is the green page container. So the first thing we need to do is we need to specify that the page is itself a container. And the way that we do that is we add on container, and then we give it a type. And that type is either going to be a size or an inline size. Size tracks both the width and the height, where inline size just gives you the width. Now, all we care about in this case is the width, so we're going to use inline size. Cool, let's go see if there's any difference. And no, there's no difference because we haven't created a container query that adjusts the CSS of the layout. So let's go build that. So we're going to go down here. We're going to build a container query. So use @container. And then we need to give it a criteria. So we want the CSS to be applied with the grid and the 2-column layout if we are greater than 900 pixels. So we need to say that our minimum width is 900 pixels. And then whatever within these curly braces will get applied if that's the case. So in that case, we want to set the layout to have a display of type grid. And we want that grid to have 2 columns where we have a 2FR, 1FR relationship. If you don't know what this FR thing, basically a relative size. So in this case, it's 2-to-1 or 66% and 33%. If you wanted 75% and 25%, you could do something like 3-1. You can do all kinds of combinations, but it's just a nice way of being able to say the relative sizes of the different columns. And then we want a gap between them, so we get a 1 rem gap. All right, let's take a look. Hey, this is looking good. Let's try it out. Make it smaller. And yeah, exactly. How cool is that? How easy is that? That is nuts. That is so, so easy. I love it. Okay, so we have the first part of our system working. We've got the basic layout of the page responding. So now we need to think about these cards in here and how they are responding. So let's take a look at the structure of those cards. So the cards follow a very similar pattern. Basically, you've got a 2-column layout when the card is wide, and you've got a no layout, a stacked layout, when the card is tall like this. So first thing we need to do is we need to build out some cards. So let's go in our app and build out some cards. And our card's just going to have 2 parts. It's going to have the image part and the info part. And then we're going to have a bunch of cards. All right, now let's go over here into our app.css and add some information for card. So we want our cards for all the H1s in there to have a border so we can see it and a min height so that we can see it. And let's use red for that border. Okay, cool. So now they're laying out exactly how we would expect that they would lay out. So a stacked div, which is great in this case over here because it's exactly what we want. It's not so great over here because we want that 2-column layout. So we need to do another container query. So what we need to do is specify that these blue boxes, the main and the article tags, are themselves containers, because the really cool thing, the secret sauce in container queries, is that they effectively stack. If you have a container query on one of these cards, then it's going to, unless you give it a specific name for a container, which you can, is going to look for the container that's basically the closest in the hierarchy. So we specify that this blue box and this blue box over here are containers, then it's going to look at that for the sizing. So how do we do that? Well, we can go back over here and we can just give a class to the main and the article and say that they are containers. All right, let's go over to our app CSS and say that our type of container just applies that container type. Cool. Now, no change because we don't have a corresponding container query. So what do we want? Well, we want a container query where if it's about, say, I don't know, 40 rem or so, I'm going to use rem in this case because you can use rem or you can use pixels. Then we want to go into that 2-column layout. So let's go over here to our container and make a new container query. We'll say that our min width is going to be 40 rem. In that case, we're going to take that card class and we're going to give it, again, a grid layout where we've got, I think, about a 1-to-3 layout with no gap. All right, let's go take a look. Didn't apply. Okay, so why is that? Well, maybe this is too big. So let's say about 36 rem. Oh, there we go. Okay, so it was the criteria that I'd messed up there. So it was looking to see if it matched a certain size, and I guess it would never get to that size. So now we got this cool thing, right? We got the 2-column layout when it's nice and wide like that, and we got the 1-column layout when it's not wide. And there we go. Now we're into the 2-column layout and down into the 1-column layout. It's exactly what we want. Rockin'. We are so good. I think we've got this. So now we have our layout done. It's working the way that we want to. And that's step 1 when it comes to responsive layouts. 1, get the layout working with the boxes and the blah and all of that. Get it just working. And then work on the content. If you work on both at the exact same time, I'm telling you, me to you, you will lose your mind. So please don't do that. Okay, so let's now go and take away some of these boxes and start actually building out a really cool page. All right, so we can go and take out, let's see, some of that stuff. Don't need that. Don't need this border in here and min heights, blah, blah, blah. Don't really need min heights. That's all just debug stuff. Cool. Okay, and we can get rid of our goldenrod container there. Where is that? That's also there. Okay, yeah, good. It looks like garbage. I get it, but it's what we want, right? So if we want to pull this in, cool, take this out, awesome, perfect. So now we need some data, we need some images. So let's go and get those. So here's some images. Of course, all of this is in the GitHub repo that's associated with this project. Free to use it, of course. To you, no problem. And then we need some data. So we'll create a movies.json file that has the title, the image, the subtitle, and the description. All right, so now we just need to bring in those movies. And we're going to give them to the card. So we'll have the image, title, subtitle, and description. All right, so I'm going to bring in a little HTML that implements on this. So we've got our first div is going to be that image, and it's going to use a background image to set the particular image that we want for this card. But otherwise, it's just going to use an image as the class. And then the info section is going to have our title, subtitle, and our description. All right, let's go take a look. All right, so let's go take a look, and nothing in there because we're not actually using movies and we're not actually passing any of those props. So that's not a good thing. So let's go over here to our card and destructure some of the movies into those cards. We'll take the 0th one there, 1 and 2. And then for these guys, I don't know, random sampling. So 3, 2, and 1. Nice. So obviously we don't have all of the extra stuff that we need for the styling of these cards. And that's where we go from the layout to the styling. So let's go over here to our app.css. And now let's start actually styling some of these things. So actually, let me take out some of this just clutter. Cool. All right. So for our image, we want to use a background repeat pattern. So we're going to use that background image URL and we're going to have it cover, and then we're going to center it and we're going to give it a min height. So that's going to give us our nice image. Oh, looking better already. I like it. Okay. Now for our info section, we just want to give a little padding, and we want to go and give that H4 for the subtitle a italic style. So let's go take a look. Ooh, all right, cool. And for the card, I think we want to give it a little bit of a margin on the bottom. That's just going to move them out a little bit. Yeah, okay, so we get a little bit of margin in there. So that's nice. Let's do a check again to make sure that this is all responding well. Oh, that looks really, really nice. I like it. Okay, so I think the last thing here would be to add on this corner radius stuff. And so that's an interesting thing. We're going to have more container queries because we want to apply specific styling, not just layout, but specific styling based on certain layouts. So in this case of the horizontal layout, we want the arc to be on the left-hand side, and then the vertical orientation, we want it to be along the top to give it a nice cardy sort of look. So let's go over here, and we've got the wide container already. So let's go and just add on to that some border radius for the image. All right, there we go. And that is the new one. That's not the old one. They're starting to look so similar that you need to check the title. That's great. This is so awesome. Okay. All right, so the last thing we need to do is we need to go and put a border radius on these guys. So we need a corresponding container query for max width. We need to say up from 0 pixels to 36 rem, we want to put a border radius on the top. So let's go do that. So we'll have a max width container query. And then for that, we want to add on to image. We want to move the position of the image around a little bit, kind of give it a nicer position, accentuate the top of the image, and then give it a top left and top right radius. Perfect. And then I think there's one last thing. Yeah. So you can also apply visibility to things. Obviously, with container queries, you can change any kind of CSS. So one thing we want to do is we want to get rid of the description. We just want the title and the subtitle in this tall layout. So how do we do that? Well, let's go take a look at the structure of our CSS. So we have an info class, and within that we've got the P, and that's the description. So let's go make a selector for that. And we can just say, don't show it. All right, let's go take a look. Perfect. Yeah. Actually, besides having one more Jurassic Hunt movie, these two look exactly identical. But you want to see where it doesn't look identical? Well, that is an issue. So currently, the only mainstream browser that doesn't support this is Firefox. So let's go take a look over at Firefox and see how this would render. So here we are in Firefox, and basically the result is as if we didn't have any container queries at all, because it's basically just ignoring the container queries. So what we want to do is we want to polyfill the container query, and it's actually remarkably easy. So let's go back over in our code. And there are several ways to do polyfills. You can bring them into your bundle with npm, but you can also just script tag them in. So in this case, we're going to bring in the container query polyfill, add that, and then we'll go over to our Firefox, and voila, beautiful. So it really depends on the nature of your site. I actually think using container queries as of today was probably fine. They're going to work in Chrome. They're going to work in Safari. They're going to work in the mobile browsers out of the box. The only issue you're going to have is Firefox, and there's a really good shim for this. So I think you're safe to use it starting today. All right, so let's get out of Firefox and let's talk about Tailwind. So it turns out there is a first party, meaning that Tailwind itself, the project, has created this plugin to allow for container queries in Tailwind. And it's really easy. So let's go build this again using Tailwind, and I'll show you just how easy this is. Now, I will say before we get into this, got to keep track of the fact that the breakpoints are slightly different. Well, not slightly, quite a bit different between the standard breakpoints for media queries and the breakpoints for container queries, which appear to be much smaller and much more granular. Just something to be aware of. You can actually adjust those to your heart's delight, but they are different between the two. Okay, so let's go build our application. All right, so I'm going to go back up a level and I'm going to create another application. We'll call this one Tailwind Test and give it a template of React. All right, let's go in there and install it and then run it. All right, good, cool. So let's bring over our shim first thing. Why not? Just throw it in there. Tailwind tests. Okay, cool. We'll call this the Tailwind version while we're here. And let's go take out all of our stuff. And while we're at it, let's go bring in our assets. So I'll go over here to public, copy these, and then just paste them into public. I'll copy movies.json and paste it into the source. All right, so let's go install Tailwind in our app. Here are our install Tailwind instructions. So let us start by installing some dependencies for Tailwind, PostCSS, and Auto Prefixer. And now we'll do the CSS init. That's going to give us our Tailwind configuration file, which we need to adjust a little bit by following the instructions here. We just change the content so that it's looking both at the index HTML and also anything within the source directory to see which styles it's going to bring in. Nowadays, Tailwind aggressively looks to see which styles you use and then removes the ones you don't. The older versions of Tailwind used to do exactly the opposite. So let's go, let's see. The next thing is we're going to go and adjust the index CSS. So let's go do that. Get rid of everything. Bye. And get rid of everything in the app CSS. Don't need that. Awesome. Cool. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to head on over here to our container query stuff and add on the plugin for that. So we're going to go and bring in the container queries first party plugin and then add it to our list of plugins in the Tailwind configuration. And let's see what we got. We should have exactly nada. So if it's blank, it's a good thing. Take a look. Yep, nothing. Perfect. So now we need to bring in our app.jsx and we'll just start changing the classes that we had here into Tailwind classes. So let's go over here to app.jsx, paste that in there. And if we are good, then everything should just basically be unstyled. Yeah, looks good. So now we just need to start changing out these classes because we don't have a page. So we have a Tailwind max width class that says that we have a maximum width of a certain size, so 5XL, just around 1,000 or so. We want to bring it in from the size. We use MX Auto. And then how do you say this container? Well, you just say @container. How easy is that? All right, so now it's in the center. Cool, good. So now, again, I talked about how the breakpoints are different. So we want a breakpoint for the container, the layout container, to be around 4XL because that's about 56 rem, which is about 900 pixels or so. So we use that one. We'll say that it's a 4XL. So we're going to use at as opposed to just 4XL. 4XL will give you a media query. At 4XL gives you a container query. And we want to say when that happens, we want a grid. And we also want that grid to have a 3FR, 1FR relationship, right? So grid calls. And then you can do something really cool. You can do 3FR underscore 1FR. Let's take a look. Oh, see how easy this is? This is awesome. Okay, so let's go and make this smaller again. Perfect. So now we go from our 2-column layout to our 1-column layout, and it's just that easy. We just had to say that it is a container. It's contained within a container, and we need to give it the container query that says apply these styles for that particular container breakpoint. And hey, thankfully, these need to be containers. So just add on the at there. Cool. So now we're done with our layout. Boy, that was easy. So let's do the layout on the card. So in this case, we want a slightly smaller breakpoint. I think we were around what 50, 40 rem, somewhere in that space. So what does that map to? We're at 36 rem, so that's XL. So I want to say that in the case of our card, we want an XL layout to go into grid. And again, an XL layout to say that that grid column layout is 1FR, 3FR. All right, let's take a look. See, this is exactly where we were when we switched from our layout mode into our styling mode. So now we're into styling. This is great. How fast? I mean, all we need to do is just start up our app, install Tailwind, install that plugin, and then just start changing out a few of these classes. It's awesome. I mean, it's good to know how to write them by yourself, but it's really good to know that you could use something like Tailwind to make it very easy. Okay, so let's now get into styling out our image. So we'll first do the background stuff to say that it's non-repeating and that it should cover and it should center. Now we'll give it a height. Cool. Let's take a look. Awesome. Although I think we need to give the card a little margin on the bottom. So let's do that. That's easy. Okay. And then finally, we need to put the trimming on the top there. So we need to give it the little border radius. So we'll start off with the default. So that's going to be the rounded on the top to a certain size. That's 3XL. So let's take a look. That's going to go and round everything to the top. But of course, now we don't want that to be rounded to the top. So in the XL mode, we want the top radius to not be rounded. But we also want the left-hand side to be rounded. Take a look. All right, so now we just need to style up this content section in here. So for our info, we just want to give it a little padding to bring it in. And then we want our title to be a little bit bigger. So we'll give it a margin on the bottom. We'll make it bigger and make it bold. For our H4, we'll give it a margin on the bottom and make it italic. Oh, looks good. And then for the description, in the default case, which would be the non-large case, we want that to be hidden, right? So we don't want that. So let's do class name hidden. That's going to hide it everywhere. And then we need to bring it back in the XL. And so we'll say that that is block. Basically return it to its default. Perfect. And that's it. That's the Tailwind port right there. So of course, all of that code is available to you on GitHub for free. Feel free to use it and play with it and get familiar with these container queries, because I think, honestly, they absolutely are the future of responsive design, and they will strongly impact how we develop our components, because now we no longer have to do all of the work of figuring out, hey, what am I contained in? How big is my width? I've done a lot of that stuff in the past and manually adjust styling based on that. You don't need to do any of that. anymore. And look how easy all of this is. So I hope you now clearly understand what container queries are, how to use them both on a vanilla CSS project and also in a Tailwind project, and also a methodology for working through how to build responsive layouts, layout first, and then styling second, so that you don't lose your mind. Of course, in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments about any of this, be sure to put that in the comment section down below. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this. Maybe you're as excited as I am. I can't wait to hear it. In the meantime, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really like the video, be sure to hit that subscribe button and click on that bell and be notified the next time a new Blue Collar Coder video comes out.